If you're a shorter rider, say under 5'6", you may be concerned about feeling comfortable on your bike. While seat height is a big consideration for beginner riders, rest assured that as you gain experience, you can learn to be comfortable on just about any motorcycle, regardless of its size. There are plenty of short kings or small women out there riding big adventure bikes or super tall dirt bikes and doing just fine. But there are still some great motorcycles for a shorter beginner rider to feel comfortable on without fearing of tipping over or being unable to be comfortable putting both feet down. For short beginner riders, it is really hard to go wrong with a small displacement cruiser. The Rebel 500 is a great platform to start on if seat height is a major concern. The Rebel 500 has a 471cc parallel twin that makes about 46 horsepower and 32 foot-pounds of torcos. This is a really solid starting point for a new rider because it's really not enough power to scare you and limit your ability to learn, but it's also not painfully underpowered in a way that's going to lead to boredom very quickly. The Rebel 500 has an extremely approachable 27-inch seat height, so just about anybody will be able to flat-foot this thing. It also weighs just 421 pounds, so if you're incredibly short and need to tiptoe a bit, you're not going to feel as if you're going to lose control and drop it. It's not some big, hulking 900-pound Harley. There's also the Kawasaki Vulcan S. Now, the Vulcan S is a bit of a strange bird, kind of being an odd sporty cruiser that uses the 650cc engine pulled from the Ninja 650. But don't let the Ninja name scare you. The performance offered is not going to blow your face off. But it has a little bit more juice on tap than the Ninja 500. This bike also has Kawasaki's ErgoFit system, which allows the riders to reposition the handlebars, foot pegs, and seat to find the optimal ergonomics for their size. That's definitely a significant feature that can help inspire confidence in the newer, more vertically challenged rider. For shorter riders who want a sport bike, entry-level machines like the Ninja 400 or 500 or the Yamaha R3 sit just shy of 31 inches. And in fact, the MT-03 might be your best bet here. That motorcycle sized really well and has a very low seat height of just a little over 30 inches. To give you context, that's the same height as a Grom. The Z400, Z500 are going to sit right around that same height, so if you prefer the naked bike style, definitely go for that. These bikes are going to be quite a bit taller than cruisers like a Rebel or Vulcan. With how lightweight these bikes are, typically about 350 pounds, a shorter rider can feel comfortable tiptoeing or just having one foot down and leaning the bike over a little bit without a problem. As you grow as a rider, in terms of experience and not height, hopefully you're not some 12-year-old who's growing into their bike, your height's going to become less and less of a factor in determining which bike to ride. But there is still some intermediate bikes that aren't too tall that can sort of be a good stepping stone in your journey. Cruisers are still going to be the most accommodating for short riders. The Indian Scout has a super low 25.5-inch seat height, which makes it great for short riders, but a little bit cramped for taller riders. The Scout is a fun, modern cruiser that makes about 100 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque, and the bike has a lot of character from the liquid-cooled V-twin, and a kind of retro cruiser charm if you're into that sort of thing. We had an Indian Scout back in 2020, and I had a ton of fun with that motorcycle, way more than I thought I would. Speaking of retro charm, the Triumph Bonneville is also not too powerful or tall to scare off a shorter rider. The Bonnie T100 sits at around 31 inches and makes 64 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque. These retro-styled modern classic bikes, though, are a little bit heavy, weighing about 500 pounds, so that's something you might want to keep in mind. If you're interested in a middleweight naked bike, the seat height on the Triumph Trident 660 is actually pretty approachable at 31 inches. At 31 inches on the seat height, if you're 5'2", you're probably going to be tiptoeing a bit, or you're just going to have to get used to having one foot down with your butt shifted off to the side of the seat a little bit. That's just the name of the game when it comes to these motorcycles, so you can't let it deter you too much. The Trident 660 makes 81 horsepower and 47 foot-pounds of torque and weighs in at 419 pounds, making it very well suited as an intermediate machine. Similarly, the Daytona 660 sits below 32 inches as well, making it one of the most approachable, fully fared middleweight sport bikes around these days. Now, you're going to see this a lot, that most sport-going, bigger motorcycles have that 31 to 32-inch seat height, and I'd highly recommend going to a dealership and sitting on all these different bikes and really getting a sense of what that means. Now, Triumph is getting a lot of attention in the short rider segment because they also sell the Street Triple Low, which gets you the fun 3-cylinder engine that's good for 116 horsepower and 57 foot-pounds of torque, but it also comes with a 30.7-inch seat height, which is almost 2 inches lower than a normal Street Triple. And because it comes from the factory as a low model, they've adjusted the geometry so that it still handles normally. Oftentimes, when riders try to lower a motorcycle, you're compromising the motorcycle's geometry and its handling. The BMW F800 GS is also a bike that can be purchased with a factory lowering kit. Stock, it has a 32-inch seat height, which is already pretty low for an adventure bike, to be honest. But with a lowering kit or an extra low seat, it can sit as low as 30 inches. A lot of shorter riders who want to get in on the GS life end up on an F800 GS because there's a lot of modifications that can be done with OEM parts to make it one of the most approachable adventure bikes around. If you're looking for an expert level bike that's sized perfectly for short riders, you're likely not going to have a ton of luck. I think it's believed that if you have the skill level to ride a powerful motorcycle, you've got the mechanics and muscle memory down to learn how to navigate riding a larger bike as a smaller rider. So there aren't really any quote-unquote expert level bikes that are built with small riders in mind. But you could always get a Turbo Hayabusa with a lowered suspension. I hear those are pretty good. Keep in mind, for these bigger, more expert level motorcycles, manufacturers typically size a sort of 5'10", 170-pound rider on them. That's kind of their sweet spot. So if you're a little below that or a little above that, you should fit okay. It's really when you start going to the edges of the bell curve, if you are 5'1" or 6'7", that's when fitment becomes a big issue. But for medium-sized riders, that 5'6" to 5'10", kind of the middle of the bell curve, you got plenty of options across every category. Some of these bikes may require a bit of tiptoeing or 1 foot down for those on the smaller side of medium, but that's just the name of the game, baby. For beginner bikes, you're gonna have a lot more bikes at your disposal without being limited to super low slung cruisers. You got the Husky's Farpillin 401, it's got a 32-inch seat height that should be manageable by many. It's got the 399cc single from the new KTM Duke 390. It's been upgraded for 2024, makes about 45 horsepower and 29 foot-pounds of torque. This bike has a lot of cool up-spec features like adjustable suspension and bi-brake brakes. It really, I still think, is one of the coolest bikes in the category. If you want a beginner squid missile, the CF Moto 450SS has a 31-inch seat height that's pretty approachable as far as sport bikes go. A do-it-all-rounder like the Honda CB500X could be a good fit for medium-sized riders as well. You can pretty much pick whatever you want. You'll be able to fit on basically any of these motorcycles. But once you start getting up to like a Himalayan 450, for example, it ranges from 32.5 to 33 inches, and you'd be surprised how much one extra inch makes of a difference. And you'll also notice that as you go for more off-road or more adventure-capable motorcycles, they will get taller because they have longer suspension travel, more ground clearance, and just by their very nature, they have to be a bit taller. It's not uncommon for some dirt bikes to have a 38-inch seat height, but that doesn't tell the whole story because you can typically tip them over to one side and get 1 foot down because they're so ridiculously lightweight. This Ninja 500 SE is gonna end up in one of your driveways out there watching this video right now because it's a giveaway bike on YamiNoob.co. Become a member for your very best chance to win. Rack up your entries and assign them towards giveaway bikes as we do them, or hold on to them and then put them towards your extra special spicy bikes that you see in the future. Make sure you become a member on YamiNoob.co for your best chance to win. Don't miss out. For intermediate level bikes for medium-sized riders, you have tons of options as well. You can't go wrong with an MT-07. You also can't go wrong with an SV650. I mean, do I really need to say more? These are just the tried and true classic street-going motorcycles. But if you want something a bit more unique and out there, the Kawasaki ZX4RR has a 31.5-inch seat height. Slots a little more into the intermediate bike category instead of bigger bikes due to the price, the peak power, and the specific nature of its design and purpose. It is definitely aimed at the diehard street squid or track junkie that wants to experience the top-end thrill of a traditional 4-cylinder 600 while still being able to stay within relatively legal speeds. And for more adventure style or touring bikes, the V-Strom 800 sits at 32.5 inches, and it's pretty low for the category. There's also the V-Strom 800DE, which is catered more towards adventure or off-road riding that sits a bit taller at 33.7 inches. But you see where I'm going with this, right? The vast majority of bikes sit in this category. So moving up, those kind of medium-sized riders, again, an MT-09 has a 32.5-inch seat height, and while I did mention the Street Triple Low for the short riders, a medium-sized riders fits great on a Street Triple R and RS with a 32.5-inch seat height. If you wanted to go full zoot, the ZX-10 has one of the lower seats in the category, coming at 32.9, but as I said in the short rider section, if you're pursuing super powerful expert-level bikes, your experience and skill should be a limiting factor, not your height. So if you generally think you're ready for a hyper naked or a leader bike and your height falls between 5'6" and 5'10", you can probably make do on just about anything because guess what? Motorcycling is sized for you. Now we'll talk about bikes for taller riders. For the sake of today's video, we're gonna say 5'11" and up. I'll still try to cater the bikes to the larger end of the spectrum because very tall riders can have almost as many disadvantages as very short riders when it comes to bikes they feel comfortable on. So if you're 5'11", like I am, you'll probably fit just fine on just about any motorcycle on the planet, from a Grom to a Hayabusa. But if you're 6'4" or taller, you're probably gonna need a little bit of help. Tall riders and beginner bikes often seem like oil and water. They just don't get along that well. A good beginner bike for a taller rider would definitely be a dual sport. The Honda CRF 300L Rally has a 35.2-inch seat height, so you have plenty of room for those tree trunk legs of yours. Although if you're 6'4", you'll also likely be close to maxing out the suspension of just about any stock motorcycle on the road due to your weight. It's pretty uncommon for someone to be 6'4", but also somehow 165 pounds. You'd be very, very thin at that point for your size. So typically, riders in this size category are 200 plus pounds, and they're kind of maxing out the springs that manufacturers put in the bikes from the factory. A lot of really tall riders have had good success on starting on a Kawasaki KLR 650. And while the KLR isn't an ideal starter bike for lots of riders for lots of reasons, the 34.3-inch seat height and bigger, beefier chassis and engine will provide a little bit more comfort. If you're a much taller rider wanting to get a more intermediate level machine, the Tenere 700 is the MT-07's more butch off-road sibling. It's got the same CP2 engine with some off-road components and the 34.4-inch seat height. Most middleweight ADVs can fit a larger rider pretty well, like the Touareg 660 or the Honda Transalp. I recently got a Touareg 660, and at 5'11", I feel like that bike is a teensy bit too big for me, so I think for a rider in that kind of 6'2" to 6'4" or beyond category would actually fit really well on it. Or there are more up-spec European dual sport or supermoto bikes like the KTM 690 SMCR or the Husqvarna 701 Enduro. The SMCR is a 35-inch seat height, and the Husky has a whopping 36.4-inch seat height. Each bike's using the same 693cc single-cylinder engine that makes 74 horsepower and 54 foot-pounds of torque. They're super lightweight and easy to throw around on the street, and the supermoto version are in some trails or in the Enduro. The Ducati Hypermotard is essentially a naked bike in a supermoto style, so it'll be a little bit more capable of high-speed riding with a bigger, more powerful engine, but it still has comfortable dual sport style ergonomics. Hypermotard SP has a very tall 35-inch seat height. When it comes to more expert level bikes for tall riders, you know the Hayabusa is like the cream of the crop if you're looking for a sport bike. There's also the ZX-14R that will accommodate a bigger rider, or you could get a sport touring bike like an FJR 1300 or Honda Goldwing. Each bike is a behemoth in its own right, so having a bigger or taller rider is inconsequential. A Goldwing is going to go like it goes whether you're 150 pounds or 250 pounds. It literally doesn't care who is riding the bike. The BMW 1250 or the new 1300 GS are always revered as being incredibly comfortable bikes for taller riders as well, but if you're a little cooler than the average GS rider, the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XE is also a fantastic bike for larger motorcyclists. One thing that I would like to point out is that don't jump into a 600 or a 1000 just because you're a bigger guy and you think that the small bike is just going to be too teeny tiny for you. There's plenty of larger motorcycles that will be power appropriate for your skill level. Just because you're large doesn't mean you're ready for 150 horsepower right off the get-go. That's a ton of power, and that bike is still going to move like crazy, even if you weigh 250 pounds. But at the end of the day, no matter your size, just go to the local dealer and sit on some different bikes and see how they feel. That's going to be the easiest way to know for sure which bike fits for you. Let me know down in the comments if you've had sizing issues with the motorcycle and what your solutions were. But if you have your heart set on a certain motorcycle, there's always workarounds in regards to different seat options or lowering links. Or you can just learn to live with your height limitations. There are plenty of smaller female riders out there killing it off-road on 35-inch seat height, 500-pound adventure bikes. So really anything is possible. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. I'll catch you later. Fact: Antarctica is the only continent without a native human population. Goodbye.
Wake up! You're dreaming! You're dreaming! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! None of this is real! None of it's real! None of it's real! Wake up! Keep watching Amy Noob.